All right, so shall we begin with our next session? Already sleepy. Can we all stand up? Please stand up. Yes, can we all raise our hands? Let the food go down. I don't want sleepy people here. And all our distinguished guests will feel that we have made you eat so much. All right, all the backbenchers, can you please come up in the front? You want to dance? All right. Do we have some music, guys? Music. Yes, I think we have. Yes. All right, let us stand up once again. Twist your bodies. And please come in front meanwhile. All the backbenchers, please come in front. Thank you. Thank you. All right, let us start the post-lunch program, one of the most dreaded ones. But then the panel that we have for you right now is not going to let you sleep. And to moderate our panel, we have a very young and dynamic, experienced mentor with us, Mr. Dheeraj Oswal, who has 20+ years of rich business experience over 15 sectors, along with strong education background of chartered accountancy. He is someone who knows how to play every game of life. Interesting. Where to start, where to stop, where to shrink, where to expand, how to close the deals and partnership with win-win situation. An entrepreneur with an investment firm to acquire private equity stakes in businesses, he has incubation center in Pune. He is also associated with a couple of companies and NGOs for mentoring and guidance. And the panel that he's going to moderate is titled Flip Side of Being an Entrepreneur. So let us start, and let me welcome Dheeraj Oswal.
Hello. Thanks, Ruchi. It's being honored to deliver a panel here, and let me call all the panel members. Sir, we have a very outstanding personalities here. I would like to call upon Mr. Ravi Pandit, who is the co-founder and the chairman of the KPI Cummins. Please come, sir. Then we have G. Ramchandran, sir, please. Then we have G. Ramchandran, sir. Ramchandran, sir, is here? Okay, I think he must be joining. Then we have V. Premnath, sir, Dr. Premnath. Sir, Dr. Premnath, sir. So Dr. Premnath, sir, is running Ventura Center. So he is a very distinguished personality here. Now let me call upon Shrikant Shastri, sir. He is all the way coming from New Delhi. Welcome, sir. And Pradeep Bhargav, sir. Mr. Pradeep Bhargav. I would request Richie that when Mr. G. Ramchandran is here in the hall, please call him upon on the stage. Thank you. So, what is the subject? The subject is the flip side of entrepreneurs. So before we start this discussion, let me give a brief background that why and how this term is being coined, that flip side of being entrepreneur. So everything we do in the life has a positive and negative impact on the various aspects, and today we will be discussing what is the other side of being an entrepreneur, moreover, a startup entrepreneur. With this discussion, it will help the entrepreneurs for understanding business, personal, and social challenges. So let me start with the stalwarts of the startup industry, Pradeep sir. So Pradeep sir, do you really think that there is a flip side for the entrepreneur? And if yes, if this question is yes, then can you just highlight some of the key points of flip side of entrepreneur?
So flip side, when I see it's not looking at positive or negative, but it's something that we see as a difference once you take a step into entrepreneurship. And I'll give an example of 3 points which happened when I took a decision to start on my own. So one was before I put in the papers in the company. The second is when you put in the paper. And third is after you put in the papers and then you are outside and you are trying to win back the customer, which was your earlier company. So in first case, before I put, and the idea was to see that how will the market take me if I was to start. And so I went to a few people and I said, would you give me work if I was to start? And they said, first, you have to trust yourself. Then you should ask me to trust you. And the answer was very clear that you have to step out, you have taken a decision to start, and you have to show enough confidence that you can start on your own and provide value. The second was when I put in the paper, and in a normal course, because I was responsible as a CIO and later as a CEO in the company, and there were quite a few vendors who were around. And so no sooner they come to know that you have put in the papers, so the first thing they asked, so who's the next man coming? Which means, thank you. And that's a realization you get when you put in the paper and you have been, always chased by a number of people till that time. And the third was when I stepped outside and I said, okay, now let me try for a contract in my own company now that I have started my work. And so I put in my application or request that this is the type of work I will be able to do for you. And my own company sent me the RFP which I had prepared, and that ruled me out. So fundamentally we put it, minimum 3 years and XYZ experience. And I was just going to say, who made this lousy RFP? But I knew fully well that it was me. So you get back what you have been giving all along. So this was my first experience when I started.
Fantastic. Sir has raised this discussion quite well, and now I'd like to go with Dr. V. Premnath, who is right now heading the innovations in NCL, and he has also founded the Ventura Center and mentoring startups across the globe. So my question to you, sir, I would like to hear your expert comment on the flip side of Indian tech startups, which you are maybe mentoring, and how do you advise them to overcome? So I think your background is a tech, something like a tech. So just focus, because there are plenty people who are into the tech industry right now.
So since the theme is flip side, let me focus on those
Because
aspects.
we are discussing that's the only side, because something which may going to happen wrong or other side of that. Every time other side is not wrong, but there is something you lose it out, something like that.
So in my opinion, there's a lot of mental preparation that is needed before one embarks on entrepreneurship. Of course, it can happen, but there are a couple of important things I want to point out. The first is that there's a large mindset difference between a typical entrepreneur and an employee. When you're an employee, you're thinking of creating value with you at the center of it. When you're an entrepreneur, you're building engines of creating value, and you're not really thinking of it the same way as a typical employee does. That mind shift change is actually quite a leap. It's not trivial. It is not something which, to just give you just to give you an example from another field, just think of, say, J.K. Rowling, okay? She was a teacher, But that was not what she felt would create value for her, right? It is a creative works. She is an writer. Similarly, an inventor doesn't look at the job creating value for them, right? It is the invention itself creating value for them. And a person sitting on a lot of money thinks of the money creating value for them. It's not the job that he's looking at. So many people from middle class backgrounds and first generation entrepreneurs first have to make this leap, this jump in mindsets where they get out of this frame where they're putting them at the center of everything and then thinking of that engine which will create value. And that, if there's time, I can do more. But the second important thing is that invariably in tech, any kind of startups, you're always, the startups we typically talk about are all so-called foresight businesses. I call them foresight ventures, right? Where there is an element of foresight in whatever it is. You see something ahead of others. And when you do that, invariably it's a lonely journey. You have to have the courage to stand up and, insist that this is going to be the future because nobody else or most people will not see it. And you're internally selling that vision, that this is the future. Now that lonely journey is not for everybody. People need to have courage to walk that journey, to be able to stand up and have confidence. And very often, I find that it's actually the cockiness of people that helps them get there. It's not necessarily their technical competence or their backgrounds and all of that. I mean, except to the extent that it makes them cocky. Sure.
Just awesome. I think these insights provided by Dr. Premnath must be written with the golden words. And the thing which you are referred that your education doesn't restrict you. And that example is just next to you. CA Ravi Pandit is my CA co-brother, and he is running IT industry, IT company since last 20 years. And after being, having been chartered accountancy firm for 10 years, more than 10 years. So I would like to ask you a question that what would be the flip side for an entrepreneur for his education? So whether that education really helps him or sometimes really debars it. Means what education barrier creates entrepreneurs, because it has been observed that most of the highly qualified people are doing fantastic job in some or big corporates, but they are unable to find space to start something on their own. So does it really restrict yourself when you are highly qualified to start a business or to start something on your own?
I think it's an interesting question. And I think this whole thought process that, entrepreneurship and education are likely to be at odds with each other is probably the legacy of the fact that Bill Gates left Harvard halfway and Mark Zuckerberg left Harvard halfway. But I think that is remembered, but what is not remembered is that he went into Harvard in the first place. Both of them went into Harvard in the first place. So I think it's not education, I think it's your ability to learn. I think that is important. So, to me, the key issue is whether you are able to learn throughout your life, especially if you are an entrepreneur, you are at the cutting edge of, if not technology, I should say also technology, but you are also at the cutting edge of a new business. So which means that you have to learn something new. And for learning, you have to have the intellectual ability to learn. And yeah, you can get into a rut of education and not learn anything and then disqualify yourself from entrepreneurship. But I think, if you are learning the right things in your education, I think education should help in entrepreneurship. I think this is the right time to ask a question, what can make a person an entrepreneur? I think that is the issue. And whether it is the same, that would make a person a very highly educationally qualified, I wouldn't say learned, educationally qualified person. What makes an entrepreneur? I think an entrepreneur is a person who sees an opportunity where others don't see any. And you quite often see a lot of people who would, you would see two people who would look at the same thing and one would see a problem and the other will see an opportunity. And I think that ability to see opportunity, in my opinion, is very critical. The other area is having seen that opportunity, as Dr. Premnath rightly mentioned, is the ability to walk against the tide. See, because if you are going to walk with the tide, there is no business opportunity there. Because that's already a commodity, hundreds of people are in there. You are a latecomer to that field and you will really get no benefit at all. So you need an ability to see an opportunity. You need the courage to, walk against the tide. You need a lot of persistence. And you need an ability to defer, the enjoyment of your effort. Because, I sometimes see a generation of people who believe that they start something and in the next year they raise some funding and that's the end of, that's a success. I believe that's the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't really think that you can succeed by short stints. And you really need to work a long, long period in order to succeed. The other thing is also your ability to convince others that what you have to offer is very relevant, which means an ability to put yourself in the shoes of the other person. Otherwise, you don't have a customer. You have a customer when you are able to convince him that what you are saying is not to your benefit, but to his benefit. So ability to put yourself in a customer's shoes, in my opinion, is very important, and that's not necessarily what is taught to you in an educational institution. So I think these are the things that matter. And there are more cases where the two of them kind of coexist than, when I say two means education entrepreneurship, because otherwise, why would you have so many people coming out of the Stanfords and MITs and Harvards and IITs who are running businesses? So there are many cases where you see the two of them coming together, but in my opinion, they are not necessarily, they're the same. You can be an entrepreneur without any education, like, well, I think even Jack Ma is highly educated, or Tony Ma is highly educated, so you look at new things. When you are looking at areas which call for deep technology, obviously you have to be highly educated. You can't think of somebody doing a modern new business in, say, electronics or mechatronics or healthcare without a very high education in that area. You might see somebody doing e-commerce business in an emerging entrepreneur, in an emerging economy with, basically just a flash of brilliance and not much of, existing knowledge. But I believe that as time goes by, you will need people who are highly educated to get into areas which call for deep expertise. So I would see more and more, I think the only thing I'm saying is that if somebody is not doing academically well, I don't think you should look at it as a qualification for starting a new business.
Right, sir. I think the deep insights of your experience has showed this questions well, Path. Now, I would like to take the discussion with Mr. G. Ramchandran, who is a mentor and the capitalist, and also scripted the success stories for new economy startups. Sir, according to you, what is the flip side for the Indian startups due to which they couldn't scale up, or they sell the stakes in the startups, they couldn't sell the stakes to the startups and P funds or for the MNC. So what is the limiting factor for our Indian startups for the scaling up? And what is the flip side rather on that? What are the shortcomings which is there?
I would very honestly be telling you all that if I was to look at the problems that Indian entrepreneurs face, the first thing I see is fear of failure. The second one that you see is you struggle for the go-to-market strategy. And the third one, when you struggle in the go-to-market strategy, you go back to perfecting your product without testing what the customer wants. The doubts in your mind are there. The leap of faith is not there that my product, I brought it to a certain stage, I can take it to the market, let me test it with the customer. If the customer rejects it, I'll come back and improve it. But no, half the time, the entrepreneurs are not willing to take that extra mile going forward. I think three things stand out in terms of entrepreneurship. First is you need to be brave. You need to say that I am into this because I'm in love with entrepreneurship. I want to be an entrepreneur because I want to be leading a life which is not a normal 9 to 5 or a job, but here I may be at the receiving end in terms of brickbats, at the paying end in terms of giving salary checks to employees. But I'm willing for that. Second, we need to have what I term as courage of conviction and commitment to a cause. We can't give it halfway through. And necessarily thinking of a global scale. Our problem is India till date, in the technology firmament, has not produced a product which can stand the global standards till date. And that's a tragedy despite so much of intelligence that is there. But when the same intelligence is transported to the US and other countries, the same intelligence transfers itself into brilliant products only because the environment inculcates failures and applauds success and failure in equal or more measures. I think the customer in India may be demanding, but the climate for entrepreneurship sometimes is having constraints in terms of infrastructure, and there somehow the paradigm shift is only slowly or steadily emerging. So I would give a little bit of benefit to the entrepreneurs who are coming into the system, give them the credit that this country is changing. The old economy, as some of the esteemed colleagues here on the panel were talking about, the old economy, I think you could be having native intelligence without education. In the new economy, you need to have, especially in the technology sector, you need to be literate, but surely if you're an educated illiterate with a lot of labels defying your definition and identity of an individual, I think that's not going to help entrepreneurship.
Magnificent insight, sir. I think this is called that the things are coming from the horse's mouth, and his experience and has applied knowledge, and that's what he can give you the point-wise, the explanation about the question we asked. I would urge audience that you should get it connected when you're planning to scale up your startup. Now, I would like to move on to Mr. Shastri. I think, sir, your name itself suggests that you have a tons of knowledge. And yeah, because he is IIT Kanpur and I am Calcutta, and he has built his own 2 startups and sold also to the large services ventures. And I think he's into the more on the personal side. So I would like to ask you, sir, what is the flip side for the Indian entrepreneurs in respect of the personal and social aspect? And what are the tips you would give to the overall entrepreneurs to balance the life and business?
Sure. So all of us would remember the famous movie from the 70s called Diwar, right? That scene between Nirupa Roy, Shashi Kapoor and Amitabh Bachchan, where Shashi Kapoor says, "Mere paas maa hai," most famous dialogue. Today, youngsters wear a badge of honor and say, "Mere paas startup hai." Doing a startup is glamorous for youngsters today. The brightest kids out of colleges want to do startups. It is socially acceptable, and everyone wants to become a unicorn, raise hundreds of millions of dollars, and get acquired by Walmart. So it is a big glamour thing that youngsters are chasing. It's great because I think we have the emergence of a very, very buoyant startup ecosystem. But the flip side is most people who want to pursue that tend to be underprepared. Whether they are from a good college, whether they are semi-educated, doesn't matter. They're underprepared in several ways. Notwithstanding the fact that they attend events like this, where they learn how to raise funding, how to create a business plan, but on the personal front, they're underprepared. And I'll give you some tangible examples. Remember, I mentioned it this morning, of the 40,000 startups in India, only less than 1,000 get formal funding every year, which is 2.5% of startups get funding. The remaining 97.5% do not get funding. So sooner rather than later, businesses run into financial issues, potholes, speed breakers, call it whatever. At that stage, you can't pay your employees on time, you cannot pay yourself at all, and you have immense pressure from your family. And if you're married and have kids, then you have serious trouble at home. Now, most startups I know, the ones I mentor, go through this at some stage of their career. He called me highly educated, so I should have anticipated this in advance. But in my first startup, I remember, I was down to my last 10 rupees in my wallet because I was stupid about the way I managed it. And people and your family kind of faces the brunt of it. Remember, some of you who come out of good colleges or are leaving good jobs to do a startup, look at what your family will go through. You will have to be very careful about your money. So you will be living in smaller houses, driving smaller cars, not taking fancy holidays. Your classmates, your friends and peer group will be doing all of that. You might personally have the willpower to take that. But have you taken your wife and kids into confidence? If you haven't, you're in for serious trouble. I know marriages that break down because of the stress created by not anticipating these issues. So I have a simple word of advice. Before you become a startup and become a founder, set aside 2 years of family expense requirements in a separate bank account. If you believe you're spending 50,000 rupees a month, keep 50,000 into 24 months in a separate bank account. Let your wife be the sole signatory to that account with you having no access to that money. Otherwise, the moment you run into a cash flow issue in your business, you'll dip into that. You should not have access to it. Once you do that, you can at least be assured that your family is protected and insulated from the ups and downs that you will go through. So this is an area that is never spoken about at any event or in a book or in a workshop. But I would urge you not to underestimate the gravity of the situation on this aspect. If your home is not peaceful and calm, it will show up on the business side. So that's my simple word of advice.
It's stunning guidance. I think this is called that you hit to the ground for exactly for the water, and you have here. I hope if someone has some questions in the audience, you can raise the hands, and then we can have some more interactive session in this. If not, then we can also continue with this. Yeah? I think organizers, can you arrange a mic for them?
Check. Good afternoon, sir. My name is Ritesh. And my question is, what is more crucial to success of a startup, idea or the execution?
Your question to whom? Any specific person on
No,
the panel?
sir. Anyone.
Okay. Well, can you repeat the question?
What is more crucial to the success of startup, idea or the execution?
Okay.
What is more crucial? I think,
Maybe I'll
sir?
give it
Yeah,
a shot.
you can.
Yeah. So clearly both are. That's a short answer. but let's understand what's involved. Typically most businesses, when they're getting started at that stage, there is the idea and how you put it together in terms of what problem it solves, what will be the revenue model, how it is going to be a sustainable business, and so on and so forth. Once you're there, you're trying to arrange resources, timing, and all kinds of things to execute on that plan, right? And typically what happens is most entrepreneurs are so committed, or the good guys are committed to the end point, that even if they fail in execution, they'll go back to iterate. So it's always an iterative process. It is never a linear process that it failed and you stop with that. Now, the first part is where the real, in my opinion, the real entrepreneurship lies, okay? Because you have to start with identifying that opportunity and putting together a plan around it, a revenue model around it, and so on. And that's where really the entrepreneurial initial effort really comes in. That's where you're carrying the baby at the toughest time, you know. Execution, you can get help, you can raise money, you can sell your idea to many people to convince them to partner you to make that possible. I'm not saying it's any less important. It is just that that is something which comes later. The distinction between an entrepreneur and, say, a typical manager is actually in this, that the idea is so critical, the business idea itself. And the execution of it they might teach you in MBAs, but not necessarily the first part. The first part doesn't get taught in typical business schools or management schools, right? So both are important. You can't do one without the other, but I think you have to be an entrepreneur, you have to first start with the first part. Without the first part, you can be a very good manager in a very good company where the opportunity is identified by somebody else, right?
So one more question, please. I just want to ask that luck is necessary for being an entrepreneur.
Yes, sir. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I was supposed to do that, but anyway, thank you, sir. Thanks for your help. So the questions the sir had rightly pointed out that this particular session is we are understanding what is the flip side of the entrepreneurs, what is the other side, what is the disadvantages or what is the darker side of the being entrepreneur, and because we are raising a discussion on that, so I would request all of the participants also that they should limit their discussion over on this particular topic. As far as other topics are concerned, we have other sessions coming up where you can ask those questions. So I would urge everyone to ask about the flip side, or if they are doing some businesses and they have seeked some failures or some other side that can be discussed. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Yeah, please.
So this is Mr. Sastri. He mentioned that he had 10 rupees in wallet, so assuming that including bank balance. So just curious, how did you manage that situation? And second part, which is like, I'd like to know, how did you make sure that things are not repeated, were not repeated in future?
Sorry, the second part of the question was how
did you ensure that no such situation in future?
Okay. So the first part I'll give you with, I'm a movie buff, so you'll get one more movie analogy from me. I don't know whether this is a real story of Rajnikant or one of those many jokes that have been created about Rajnikant. There goes the story that the villain had held the heroine hostage, and he was at the other end of the phone. He was supposed to call his henchman and say, if Rajnikant doesn't listen to me, you will kill the heroine. So he picks up the phone to call, and they show his call traveling through the telephone line. But Rajnikant reaches faster than the telephone line to save the heroine. So my story was something like that. I had 10 rupees in my wallet. I have 5 credit cards that were maxed out, and my petrol was very close to the red line. So I didn't know whether the 10 rupees would finish first, the petrol would finish first, and where I would be stranded. So the way it got eventually managed was, sometimes people spoke about perseverance here, right? When you persevere, God has his ways of smiling at you in many different ways. So as it happened, clients who owed us money for 6 months and 9 months certainly paid up at that period of time. So you had short-term respite. Then I'll give you another honest thing that happened. So vendors used to show up to collect money, and those who were in the session in the morning would know I mentioned that there was one vendor who actually came to my office and caught me by my collar. As it happened, another vendor, a travel agent, showed up at my home on Sunday, and my brother-in-law, my wife's brother, happened to be visiting. And he said, "Ye kaun aaya ghar pe, kyun aaya karke?" So I told him, this is the guy. So he said, you know what, you're stupid. I'm in the banking industry. Let me figure out a way to get you some line of credit or working capital from the bank. So that's how we kind of overcome that problem. Finally, the market turned over a year's time. 98, 99, all our clients were tech companies in India and overseas. And we went through a bad patch. Fortunately, the market turned. And so then we came out of the trough, and then the rest is history, actually. So if you persevere, it works. And as one of the themes of my video series is, Lage raho Munna bhai, once you do that, finally you'll see light at the end of the tunnel.
Thank you. I have a question for any of you. It's very good to talk about the failures you don't say and listen to motivational talk. But as an entrepreneur, how do you handle the failures? Means how do you keep yourself means anyone, I think you can answer it more specific manner. But how do you handle, because in my company, there's a key person who is a tech guy or he's a sales guy who was bringing the major sales, and he has left in the company, and now I don't know how to handle it. Or anything else. I couldn't pay this month's salary because of some other reasons, or I stuck with the collections. So there are plenty other reasons you tend to have a feeling of the failures, or for that particular time. So how do you handle it, sir? So can you just focus some light on this?
Failure is a deadly weapon. It, in fact, helps you in succeeding. My personal experience. I was telling some people outside also. I set up a Gold's Gym in the country. Was very proud of it. By the time I had set up about 75 units, suddenly my mind started ticking. I have in-house clients. The creme de la creme of the population is with me. Let me set up a juice bar. And I thought, being very innovative, I thought I'm a very innovative guy. And I said, I'll call it J-Cart, juice cart. Set it up in all the gyms. I didn't have to spend any money. Put up the juice bars. It was only 100 square feet of space. And it hardly cost anything. And the first day after the announcement, in Pali Hill, in Bandra, where I have my gym, I did a sale of 50,000 rupees for the first day. And I can assure you this much, that I thought I am a genius. The second day, I did a sale of 500 rupees. I said, what happened? 50,000 for the first day, 500 rupees for the second day. Third day, it turned out to be 200 rupees. And the fourth day, it came back to 500. Over the month, I found that I never reached even in 10,000. I reached in 1,000, 500, 1,500, and I looked back. I had my own small team. Now the gym business was being run by my other partners. They were also watching the fun. This guy wanted to be extra smart. He said he'll use a captive audience and get it. I had not understood the customer profile. In India, after a workout, you don't take juices. You'll take water. अभी भी बांद्रे जिम में चाय लेने के लिए तैयार है. But if you tell them to have juice, that's a luxury. Now, what did it teach me is that I had a serious failure and I had to correct it. And the correction that was needed was very harsh. I had to close this juice business in all the gyms. And after heaving a sigh of relief that at least I have cut my losses, but I didn't leave the passion for the juice business. I redirected it, doing a research, and set it up in the malls. Today, I run about 10 juice centers in the malls. They are known as Has Juices and more. I sell in 100 square feet. I sell about 14 to 15 lakh per month. And the learning was very simple. A failure in one place can be a success in another place. Today I have success, it runs autopilot, but trust me, that failure was devastating because I thought I have the crowd with me, I have everything. In the malls, I have to seek the crowd, but remember the difference. One place I took the clientele for granted, the other place I'm cultivated the client. Big difference, same product.
Can I add to this?
Yes.
I believe that there's nothing like failure in startup. There's no concept of failure. You only learn and you move on. I'll give an example. My third venture, we spoke about education having any relevance to startups. I'm a chemical engineer, did my first business in marketing outsourcing, second in HR outsourcing, and third one is the big data and AI platform. Now, in the third case, because I knew nothing about it, we started 5 years ago when it was still ahead of its time in terms of market acceptance. I moved to the US for 18 months and personally made 200 sales calls in US, Europe, and Middle East, calling on banks, hotels, and airlines, large ones. 199 doors got banged on me, but I converted one big order. But if I had not made those 200 calls, I would not have got that one order. To me, it was all about learning what works and what does not work. And therefore, to me, whether you will have doors banged on by investors and customers, if you treat it as failure, you will get depressed. If you see it as a learning opportunity, you will move forward. Final word of advice, if you're an entrepreneur, your favorite animal should be a rhino because you need a thick skin. That's my only word of advice.
Fantastic. You want to add, sir? Yeah.
Yeah, so in a similar line, that there's nothing called failure. So idea is, it's a time when we realize. Because if we don't realize, others can continue to perceive as failure, and we can continue to believe that we are right. Whether it's a cash flow, and cash flow, we are optimistic. So when you start up, you're always optimistic that the money will come, but the money doesn't come. On the other side, that the payouts definitely happen. So now one side we can call it a failure, but the other side, what I realized is that it's a realization that this will not work. It's that time then as an individual or as an entrepreneur, then you must act. Because that action is important. In a corporate, there are a lot of people who are willing to support and say, please follow up, can you follow up? As an entrepreneur, there's nobody to ask you to do that. All you see is a red, or maybe a police guy or a vendor standing next to you and say, give me money now. So what we realize is that the people who ask money are very, very determined. And people who are to give us money sometimes don't remember us. So this is what I see, and it's a realization. It's a realization even when we try to get an order, and he said, persist till you get. Now, this persistence will happen if you believe that it will work. Or as an employee, you can say, there is no market. This product doesn't work. I think the market is down, or government has changed. So we can find the different reasons to ascribe what was the outcome versus what we want. And if you want it badly enough, you will get it.
Yeah, thank you. I think we have one more question here.
Hello, sir. This is Anurag. I would like to hear your thoughts upon
A little
some
bit
of
louder, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I would like to hear your thoughts upon some of the external challenges that you face. For example, corruption at the hands of, say, government officials when you're trying to set up, say, a manufacturing plant, which is very common in India, or other kind of challenges like how do you retain employees, or like basically the other challenges.
He's asking the flip side of the government and the Indian system, I suppose. Yeah. So, who would like to answer? I think it's something. I think it is something. It's very crucial, but yeah.
I think you, no, we don't have to be off the record. We can talk clearly saying that there are in India extra-legal transactions. Extra-legal transactions do take place. Sharp practices are there. Everybody says that we are ethical. We also say that our books are ethical. But if you look at creative accounting, it's more due respect to all of us are chartered accountants. I think we have 2 or 3 chartered accountants here sitting. But creative accounting is an art, not a science, which Indians have perfected. We need to understand that these challenges are there, and sometimes if you're going to be too ethical, my only caution to you is you're whiter than the white men and you'll be lost in the race. You need to be pragmatic, because while outside you can't say anything, you need to be pragmatic and practical and say that yes, we'll have to take it forward with us, we will have to reduce it with passage of time, and we have to bring in the ethics and practice in the system. But sometimes the law of supervening impossibility tends to come into you, and you can do nothing but grin and bear.
I beg to differ. I think the issue is what is it that you want to build? See, if you want to build an institution or if you want to build an organization, you can't build it on the foundation of acquiescence to corruption. If you are a sole practitioner, you can do what you want. But the moment you start to build an organization, if there is a feeling in the organization, hey, you know, this guy is engaged in current practices, maybe your employee will also feel, you know, if he is out to cheat somebody, why can't I cheat him? And how will you get close partners to work with you? So I believe you have to decide what is the game you want to play. I also think that you also have to decide what is the customer segment you want to work in. You know, if working with government sees you kind of hitting against the wall of corruption, maybe you should not be selling to the government. If your product is good, if your service is good, you should sell it to somebody else. So I would think that the issues of corruption should be really at the distant periphery rather than at the core. If you are seeing too much of corruption in the work that you do, probably you are not in the right business. So I would take a very, very different stand.
Yeah, you can answer.
I have a couple of comments. The first is that you will notice that you're more prone to corruption when you're trying to take shortcuts. It's a very common thing that you will observe. If you're willing to play the game straight, it's very hard for corrupt people to do anything with you. The second point I just want to make is, it's your call in terms of how you go about it. The second point has to do with dealing with the government in other ways, so there are pros and cons one must keep in mind. For many startups, the government can be a poor customer, a large customer who pays late and so on and so forth. So you might want to consider that if it introduces unreasonable risks into your businesses, okay?
Sure.
So the way I look at it is, if you have a business story and that story is built on certain assumptions of when money will come in, how much will come in, and so on and so forth, and dealing with the government poses unreasonable risks, including regulations and so on and so forth, you need to reevaluate your business to see if you're capable of taking that kind of risk. It may not be your kind of business to take up. Sure. So, but on the other hand, on the counter side, I do see that, you know, there are certain things which only the government can do. So if your passion is in those domains, if your interest is in those domains, the kind of scale that you're seeking and so on and so forth, you have to deal with governments here or elsewhere. So I think it's a question of how important the government is to your story and whether you want to deal with them or not. But I agree with Ravi that, you know, I think there's a way without taking shortcuts, and I think it's possible to do that.
So I think my question is a bit misunderstood. When you already have a running business and then you have to deal with government employees to get business, no. Even if you want to set up some business, you have to apply for say regulatory licenses for some kind of a plant.
Yeah, but I think we have...
Even before you begin to put your factory, you have to bribe a lot of people. So I'm just trying to find out ways in which you handle this stress as an entrepreneur.
It's a simple way to address, I think it's only that it has to be a salt in a curry, not it is a curry in the salt.
Can I just add? I think so. We work with a lot of biomed kind of companies as well, and there's a lot of regulation that precedes setting up a manufacturing facility, licensing, and so on and so forth. Now, our observation is that actually, if you look at it, there's a lot of goodwill and support available to the guys who are wanting to do something good, okay, from government. I'm not denying, I'm not just telling you just for the heck of it. I'm actually telling you, in fact, in our incubator, we have had the DCGI come, okay, the drug controller, okay. We have had regulators come to share insights with some of these startups. Regulators have recently started clinics in Delhi for people who want to come and ask them for inputs on how they should plan their regulatory progress. So I think, you know, things are changing, and it's changing in the right direction. And some of these things are necessary also, because there are a lot of unscrupulous people. You have to have certain degree of regulation to get it to the right place. You don't, if you're actually following what is told, and I do understand that there are some areas which are not very clear, so it's difficult to navigate. But that aside,
Sorry to bother you, sir. But we'll be running short of time, and there are some more questions if it is there, so we should take it up.
Thank you.
I think you can WhatsApp me the questions, and I will raise this, and we can take more discussion on this. And anyone wants? Yeah, please. Can you handle the mic? Yeah.
Hi, sir. My name is Gaurav. I understand that more frequently than not, entrepreneurship can be a very stressful journey. Do you have any words of advice on managing mental health and stress?
We are taking flip side. So
Yeah,
please,
flip side.
please
Yeah,
stick to the subject and
this is the
accordingly.
flip
I
side.
request.
he's talking about mental stress.
Okay, sorry about this. So what was the question? So I think, sir, Shastri, sir.
What's the question? How do you deal with stress?
Tips
How,
and
how would,
pointers.
any words of advice on dealing with mental health and stress?
Well, now that's $1 billion business by itself, providing that kind of a service and advice. But I talk about 2 or 3 things actually. One, I would say, have a team of co-founders. Doing business alone can be lonely. If you do it alone as a sole founder, you'll go mad. Having co-founders allows you to vent your frustration, discuss ideas, that certainly helps. And second, if you've taken your family into confidence about what you're doing at business, you can obviously talk about it at home as well. And talking to co-founders, family, obviously relieves some of the pressure. Obviously, the business challenges are not going to go away just because you talk, but maybe some ideas come up when you do that. But nothing I say here will ever give you a guarantee that the stresses are going to go away. They're not going to go away.
I think that is an exercise which we do it. Mental stress is an exercise. Everyone need to handle it on day-to-day basis. So one more thing I would just ask all of you, because we are just in the closings of next, we have 5-6 minutes. And 1 minute, what message would like to give all of you from anything from your field? So all of you, I would request, whatever you want. Sir Ramchandra. So 1 minute and whatever advice you have. Yeah. Something.
I have just one thing to say. You guys need to be passionate with a capital P. That's very important when you're doing entrepreneurship. The flip side of failure, you need to be very clear that failure is going to be there in entrepreneurship in terms of the negatives that come into the system, but you have to face it. Be brave, be fearless, be resilient, and above all, be very, very courageous in saying, I have a dream, I will convert the dream to reality, and I would not want to fail. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, confidence in yourself, that's extremely important, because that is what is going to take you all the way. And next, when something really happens, we should not be afraid to ask for help. Because as said, the startup world could make you very lonely. And it's precisely the reason that we try to create a network and a collaborative system so that we can go and ask for help. So one of the things which is fundamental of the Valley Bay Area system is that you should not fear asking questions or asking for help. So do it at the earliest and have confidence in yourself.
You know, all of us, whoever's married in this room, there are days when you want to throw your spouse out of the window, right? Whether you're a husband or a wife, you're so frustrated, but you still remain married because at the end of the day, the positives outweigh the negatives, correct?
Some or other way, everyone is married or engaged.
Correct,
So
married or in a relationship. So doing a startup is the same thing. It's bittersweet, it's khatta meetha, but my personal view is that the sweet always outweighs the bitter, the meetha always outweighs the khatta. And therefore go for it, make a success of it. The only caveat I would do a startup for the right reasons. If you're passionate about a particular product, space, category, don't do it because your friends are doing it or because it is the fad. That will not give you the strength to persevere during bad times. Only that inherent passion will give you the strength to overcome.
Ravi sir.
I think the important thing is having fun doing what you are doing. You should like what you are doing. you should feel that there is some meaning or value to it. Every Monday morning is something you should cherish more than every Friday or Saturday evening. Such should be the nature of the work. Secondly, I believe that no more is a business a solo activity. So make sure that you have team with you, because it's only through a team that you can reach any heights. So love the business and love the team that you have. I think that is important.
Fantastic.
Couple of points. We talked about failure. Sometimes failure can be the best thing that happens. Jack Ma has a very nice story he tells where his cousin and he went to an interview to be waiters, right? And his cousin was more handsome and he got the waiter's job and Jack Ma didn't. And 30 years later, his cousin is still working at the hotel and Jack Ma is running Alibaba. So sometimes I think failures can be the best thing that happened to you. And I mean it really, because even in school, college, work, wherever you do it, it might, please look out for those opportunities which change your course. And remember that entrepreneurship is actually a great opportunity for those who value their own ideas and potential. Imagine a whole organization working together, all the resources you're bringing in to make that idea happen, which you originated. Where else would you get such an opportunity? And that is, I think, what entrepreneurship allows you to do. And that's what many of you should grab and go with.
Yeah, fantastic. I think all of these people have given the great insights for our not to have some flip side on the business. With this, on this closing note, I would like to share one of my experience in my life that once one of my friend texted me that when we can meet on, there was a Sunday, I just replied him back that, yes, we can meet at 4 o'clock, I am taking in trainings. So then he immediately replied me back, because we are very good friend, and he said that you're taking trainings, means that means someone who is teaching is should be something really great guy. So I said, no, I am taking trainings, I am giving the training. But anyway, in last 20 years of my couple of business failures have given me so much of business learning. So I really don't see that I need someone to train me. To sum up, because the failures will be in the life. Failures is not that the successful people doesn't have failures. Every successful people has the bunch of his failure behind. But the only thing that you overcome, that you learn a lot of things from the failures, you don't repeat the mistakes, and then you overcome. Then you are on the brighter side of the business. I think this is the message I would like to pass upon all of these distinguished guests. And on behalf of SMC Pune, I really thank you, all of you, to taking the time from your busy schedule. He is coming from Delhi, and Ravi sir, you have also taken the time on a short notice. And what to talk about Premnath sir and also all our family. And thank you very much, and keep doing it this for the social cause. Thank you very much. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, so those who don't have, I would request Shailendra sir to please felicitate.
I will not repeat a book to you. There are some people who have not got, but there's something more what I want to say. See, when we had the idea of doing a flip side, we actually originally named it dark side. Then we said maybe a government will not like it. And I was actually hoping that today the flip side would mean that what all difficulties, unexpected difficulties, though in India we anticipate so many things, but even beyond that, there are difficulties and people will point them out. Okay, in entrepreneurship journey, you might face such unforeseen things which are the flip side, I thought. But obviously, the panelists here do not wish to speak anything hard. I just found ideas of what is good, how to be an entrepreneur. That is what we have been talking, how to be a good entrepreneur, what is the success, what is the topic of the third session. That is what was kind of being repeated here. I wanted to hear really some tough
Panelists,
things.
I
some
would,
difficult things.
say like this on, on
No,
behalf
no,
of
the
panelists.
moderator has not been very,
No,
very kind of guiding
we
them.
cannot be so harsh on that. हमको entrepreneurs बनाने हैं, भगाने नहीं है sir.
No. See, we are just having a small debate, and let us enjoy, have some fun.
Yeah.
So, whether we should encourage startups, yes. Whether we should encourage failure of startups, no. So, we are saying, flip side tells people what you can expect and what will be the result. Are you ready to face those flip sides? So, that is what we are just trying to convey. Like I said in the morning, look before you leap. So, we are trying to say what you should look for, what you should anticipate. I just wanted to do that, so I wanted to make it a little stronger, but well, it has not come out that strong. That's all I'm making observation. Sorry, that is what my take on that.
But I think sir was more of the kind of the things which really falls back very bad into shape. But we tried to make it, and we tried to make it in a positive manner. So that's what I can explain. And English is such a strategic language.
Definitionally wrong. I really don't think there is anything called failure. I think it's only a learning. If in your mind there is success, nothing can make you a failure.
That's true.
So that doesn't mean that you don't take knocks every now and then. You do take knocks. But you don't take a knock that will kill you.
Yeah.
You can always fall down and get up and start working again. So I really don't think there is any hardship.
The only flip side I heard was divorce.
But I think what you didn't hear.
Even if you're not
No. I think what you didn't hear is that who knows, the divorce may be a good thing to happen for you.
That's where you are. Fantastic.
Thank you, sir.
I always like to have some fun. It's become very boring.
So I believe in every session, sir is going to come up and make it more interesting for us. Because somebody did come up to me and say that all are sleeping, do something to wake them up. And I think that is what sir was trying to do. So are we really sleeping, or should we move on to the next session? I think we're really sleeping. No? Yes, somebody is stretching. Good. All right. Let's move on. Our next panel is going to be moderated by somebody who's a co-founder and director of Funtonic, India's only startup ecosystem player operating pan-India co-working spaces and incubation centers. Investing via its seed fund in startups, has an angel network of over 600 early-stage investors, and conducting entrepreneurship development program under one roof. Akshit also heads the Digital Lending Forum for Government of Andhra Pradesh. Earlier, he was heading deal execution at Intellicap Impact Investment Network and has been a mentor to IIM Ahmedabad Power of Ideas program, and is an advisor to various incubators and accelerators, including Scale Minds. Akshit has been invited by various institutions and governments to talk on entrepreneurship, design thinking, and nurturing mind of an entrepreneur. So the panel that Akshit is going to moderate is titled Cross-Border Collaboration to Create Truly Global Ventures. Welcome, Akshit. Over to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the introduction. Can I request Abdullah, Axel, and Boris to please come on the stage? Please. Do we have Mr. Amit Paranjpe with us? Yeah, you can please sit here. Yes, please. Thank you, sir. I must admit, after Shailendra sir coming here, I'm in immense pressure right now to moderate this session in a most appropriate manner. I'll try my best, sir. Sir, आप भी आ जाइए.
Friends, see, we have a different views here. I've been promoting that we learn from the, let us say, Germany, from Kuwait, from Israel, about their startup system there, and what is the kind of success rate they get as compared to India. And we try to correct the Indian system. That was my thought about this cross-border interaction. However, the way it is being worded now is that collaboration. Yes, collaboration was part of it. So I would still say collaboration should be there, but we should also do some learning. That in India, what is it that we are doing wrong? So our success rate is 0.1 and not 100%. I think that should be brought out.
Sure,
actually,
sir.
Amit is having a lot of experience on that.
Sir, I'll definitely take care of that. Thank you. All right. So thank you so much, sir, for setting up the context. Let me give you a quick background. And so when we were actually brainstorming the contents and the discussion points of the conference, we wanted to discuss beyond funding, beyond investor pitching, because largely that's the only points of discussion that happen in most of the conferences. But there's very minimal focus on discussion points which are real and enable building real businesses. And the session that we had prior to this on flip side of the entrepreneur, I believe it was a great session from the perspective of discussing the real challenges that an entrepreneur faces when it comes to decision making, especially during the most critical times. And one piece of any business is expansion from local to national to international. And there have been various ways where we have been communicating with different ecosystem players to either expand our business or to raise investments. And largely, if you see the trend, you would have global startups who may want to come to India to expand into India. But the only primary reason you will largely have Indian startups to go global is to find investors. So the context of this discussion is to help improve the scope of Indian startups, to improve the value proposition that is available to you, so that you could become better and much more scalable global businesses. With that, I would request our panelists to introduce themselves one by one, starting from Amitji.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah. Quick introduction. My name is Amit Paranjpe. I'm a co-founder of Pune Tech, which is one of the oldest and largest online tech communities in Pune. I also run a small startup on my own. It's called ReliScore. It's into skills assessment. And I've been involved with various startup-related activities in India and in the US over the last 10 plus years. Prior to that, I was working in the supply chain area for many years in the US. I guess I'll just stop at that.
Thank you. Abdullah Hassan Thakur. I've been in the technology and telecoms industry for the last 25 years. I currently head as a co-founder and CEO of a venture capital fund based out of Kuwait called Dow Capital. We've invested in around 12 opportunities. I've personally, as an angel investor, invested in around 5 of them. Prior to that, I used to be regional director of British Telecom in Middle East and Africa. Before that, worked for a number of other companies, but that should be pretty boring, so I'll not bore you. Thank you.
Hi guys, this is Boris, and next to me is Axel. So we're Axel and Boris from Germany. We are founders of Yes Capital, based in Berlin, and we're excited to be here. And we have a big partnership with Fantonic, and wants to get to know the excited, and also be involved in the Indian economy, and yeah, that's why we're here.
Well, I think Boris said everything about us. So we have been in the technology business for more than 2 decades. And our main purpose is to indicate the future and big potential markets and support the economy and most of all the people behind the economy. So entrepreneurs are the people behind the magic, and we love to support people. So we are really happy to see a lot of people here in Pune, and for the future we think it will be much more people here in India.
Thank you so much. So let me give you a quick perspective about some work that I've been doing over the last 9 months of understanding the startup ecosystem globally. I've been talking to a lot of entrepreneurs out of US, Silicon Valley. I've been talking to a lot of them in Middle East, Africa, countries like Israel, Palestine, Pakistan as well, and India. And one thing I've concluded out of those conversations is the world is not flat. It's definitely not flat. The quality of entrepreneurs varies significantly from country to country. The deal structures vary significantly from country to country. The understanding of what it means to raise funds and scale it up to become a unicorn varies significantly. I remember having a discussion with one startup from Palestine, and we were discussing on funding. And he was very excited, quite an energetic, passionate entrepreneur, good idea. And all the time he was talking about funding. Then we came to the point of discussion with respect to return on investment. He looks at me, what is that? Are we supposed to return this investment? So that's the difference in understanding with respect to the startup ecosystems across various geographies. With that as a context, I would like to learn from each one of you to give a perspective on your respective regions. Abdullah, yourself for Middle East, both of you for Germany and extended Europe, and Amitji, in that context, for India, what exactly is the startup ecosystem? What are the activities you are seeing happening over there? What are the kind of startups that are getting funded? What is the investors' appetite in your own regions?
Well, in the Middle East, I think the biggest advantage that startup entrepreneurs have is they have a lot of support. The government has very, very large funds that support these startups. Within Kuwait alone, the fund exceeds more than $1 billion. Yeah, it goes with the $1 billion. Yeah. So I think the government support plays a huge role. Fortunately, that is good. Unfortunately, that's also too much supply and less demand, as in the talent pool is not very high. There's not a very large ecosystem of sorts that can support entrepreneurs into being professional entrepreneurs and getting somewhere. Having said that, there have been a few good acquisitions within the Middle East. So there was a food and delivery company called Talabat in Kuwait, got acquired by Deliveroo. And then another one, again from Kuwait as well, called Carriage, that got acquired by Rocket of Germany. The eco-cycle there is a little different because of the economic situation of the country and the per capita. So in terms of the difference of the two eco-cycles, I think the Indian eco-cycle is a little competitive, a little challenging, and always, your supply is much, much bigger than demand. There's a lot of talent here that needs addressing. Unlike the Middle East, the talent pool is not that large.
I mean, we can give a very detailed perspective from the European market, and Germany, especially as the biggest economy in Europe, also had some great deals in the last 5 to 7 years, also in the food business. So still, we think in development cycles, so and innovations, and that's, I mean, our purpose is to invest in innovations and support innovations. So we don't like the hundreds e-commerce business because the market is not big enough. And if you see the support from government and from initiatives in Germany, you have support, but still it's not big enough to support all the entrepreneurs. So it's very conservative. And what we like to do is to support or give a lot of information to SMEs, to industrial partners, that they put more money into entrepreneurship. And it's the same in India. It's a big, long way to go. And we need, for this way, a lot of industrial partners, a lot of government support to put the money into entrepreneurship. So there are many same things in these markets. In the end, you have to put a lot of money and support into these innovations. So we are a little bit ahead of the emerging markets, US, Europe, and also Middle East. But the fun part is to support emerging markets like India. I mean, China is quite ahead, but we are here to support India. Yes.
Yes, I can agree.
Amit, just in this context, since we're talking about government support, if you actually look a lot of economies in Europe, there are some amazing schemes by the government available, just like we could invest under Section 80C in mutual funds and get tax rebates. Government actually allows retail investors to invest in unlisted companies, startups, and take tax advantages. Where do you see the Indian government, and what kind of steps are being taken by the Indian government to boost the startup ecosystem vis-a-vis some of the other better placed regions?
Yeah, I think, as was mentioned, I think we definitely have a reverse problem. We have a lot of demand, and the demand is so huge that, no matter how much supply we have, it's still going to be inadequate. But is government doing something about it? I think it is. Is it doing enough? I think that will be a very tough question. I think it's probably not. There's always so much demand out here, right? I think for people who are interested in this, one best resource to answer this question better than me would be Premnath, who was on the previous panel, since he runs the probably one of India's best incubators at the Venture Center. And one of the things that he didn't mention, amongst all the support that they provide for startups, they are also probably one of the best incubators in the country that help entrepreneurs get to various government aids. So those could be grants, those could be soft loans, those could be venture investments. And there are a large number of government programs. Unfortunately, like many things with the government, they are not well advertised. But these programs do exist. For Pune entrepreneurs, the best resource is contact Venture Center to discover more about those programs and see if you can use them. Especially in terms of what's been happening in the last 3-4 years with this government. Clearly, startups have been a big priority for this government. I think they've started it off well with the Atal Innovation Mission. A lot of emphasis is being put on building incubators, and I think that is a good start. So I think there's NASSCOM is also working with government in terms of running a whole bunch of different initiatives. So there is, I think, good amount of activity that has just started. But I think more needs to be done for sure, and I think it needs to be advertised and taken to the people much more effectively.
So Mr. Abdullah will join us in 2 minutes. He actually had a calling from his wife to come out for 2 minutes. I thought that only happens in India. If the wife is calling, you have to make sure that you listen to her and go out. So it's good to know it's globally the same. He'll join us back in 2 minutes. I want to understand from you, Axel and Boris, a very important perspective. So you mentioned that as per you, the Germany and European startup ecosystem is far ahead. And academically also, we've learned that that is the case. What exactly do you see are the differences between startups in Europe that you're working with or have evaluated? And we've been exchanging a lot of deals over the last 6 months. We've been discussing about various industries, various startups and ideas. What are the key differences that you find? That's the first question. The second question related to that is, why India for you? You've been pretty excited about investing in India yet.
Okay, for your first question is, as you know, Europe, especially Germany, is much more developed than the Indian economy. And as we also had a lot of talks here, we believe in the future of India, but especially in Germany, is people, also us, focusing on more on the mobility side, and mobility, self-driving will come to India, but it's too early because, again, we need an infrastructure to have such a business and self-driving cars here. We need roads, a lot of roads, and also we are AR. It's focusing. It's a main focus for our side, and what else?
I mean, basically, it's more deep tech. So it's more developed. Everything with e-commerce, with established businesses, a saturated market. So there are a lot of players, and now Europe, US, Israel, focusing on deep tech. So what happened in India is there's so much potential from real estate, from infrastructure, from everything. So people focusing on more simple things. And then they will move on also to more deep tech. So, and what we like is to invest and support the future of emerging markets. From one side, there's a lot of potential. On the other side, of course, the return on invest will be much higher if you support the right people. What we like to do is we put a lot of energy and a lot of time into finding the right partners, finding the right people with the right mindset. And that's why we also partnered up with Fantonic, because they're very engaged, very active, have a very positive mind, and actually want to do something good for the Indian economy. So just to make a quick buck, to earn a lot of money in a short time, that's not our purpose. We actually want to invest long term and support the whole economy, and in the best case, of course, with as many startups as possible. So that's why we got involved into Fantonic, because it's like they looking for great startups, looking for great entrepreneurs, and then if we have the right setup, we can do a lot of great things here.
Sure, thank you. So,
and again, you guys are more hungry than Europe or Germany, so we like to feed you guys, and so be hungry and move on and work like 24 hours, 7 days a week, and 35 days. Yeah. Move on, never stop. And this is what we're missing here also in Europe and in Germany. People getting stomach getting full. Okay, they stop working like 7 days. They moving on to 5 days and 4 days, and they just going on holidays. That's why we are here. We believe in you guys, so that's why we're here. Yeah.
So that's important, and you know, one decision factor which is extremely important for them to invest in any of Indian startups is how hungry you are. And I remember when we were discussing our investment discussion with him, he'll call me at 3 a.m. India time just to see if I'm hungry enough and working 24 hours. And finally, it worked. Thank you. Abdullah, so we were trying to understand that all of you are looking at startups globally. You mentioned yesterday you started, and in fact today morning as well, that you're investing in US, UK, all these startups. So what excites you about India which differentiates with respect to other economies and other regions where you have invested in?
Well, yeah, I think what my fellow panelists just said is completely true. The hunger level in India is very high. It's really very high. People here have got tired of waiting for things to happen. They now want to make things happen themselves. They've actually stopped believing in, there's a chance in my life that will come, and then I'll be this famous millionaire. And now they've started believing in, there are no chances, I need to create opportunity myself. So for us as a venture capital fund investor, that is a very good opportunity. It's a brilliant opportunity. The talent pool India gives us is massive. The options it gives us is massive. We have to get involved, we need to get engaged, and I think today, in the little bit of time I had, I've engaged with some very excited students, very excited students. And excitement is usually a good place to begin with. So we find in India people very excited. And for us as investors, we believe that, that's the fuel one needs. India gives a lot to the world. And now India needs to build a lot for itself before it goes back to the world. So we think that opportunity of 2030 is tomorrow. We don't believe it's in 2030. So if we really, both us and you in India as entrepreneurs or business owners, the day we decide that our tomorrow begins today, I think we have already made it. So we think the hunger in India is so high that everybody talks about tomorrow today. So which is very good. Like when Akshat wanted me to attend this event, he made sure that, I attended the event. He kept following me like a ghost. Okay, and then he had 3 other ghosts also follow me. So in the bargain, I was possessed and I had to come here and start speaking to you. But guess what? It's an interesting opportunity. I'm privileged, I'm honored, I'm very touched with all the response that I'm getting. And I think this is a good place to begin something nice. So we think we are very hopeful about India. UK, US, Germany, France, Italy, Holland, all of them are great. But I think what India offers is exactly what India is known for, spice. So you guys are giving us that spicy bit, which we are very excited about. And we guys were talking about it yesterday night, the 3 of us, And Mr. Agrawal was kind enough to host us with lots of food, actually. but yeah. So no, we are very excited, very, very excited.
So Amit, I want to learn from you and followed with Abdullah and Axel and Boris, both of you. All the Indian startups, especially the ones that are scaling up, already getting into the unicorn category, are looking to go global. And we already have Oyo Rooms, which has expanded its footprints into China. I was reading about their reasoning and the thought process when they launched in China. And what these guys were saying is when we actually launched in China, we did not position ourselves as an Indian company. We actually positioned ourselves as a Chinese company. Now, there are different ways to look at that kind of an approach. I'm choosing to take the pessimistic way to look at it. And now this is very contrary to the way Indian consumers will perceive an international brand, be it from Germany, be it from US, launching in India, let's say an Uber. We would rather be more convinced and be excited to work with brands or be customers of brands which are international brands. And I'm seeing a lot of activity, especially from a lot of innovative economies like Israel, where they have amazing products and they see India as a huge consumption market and they want to establish their footprint into India and expand their markets because their ability to scale in their own regions is very limited. So how do you believe these kind of opportunities could lead to effective collaborations and create more effective conglomerates?
Yeah, I think you covered 2 different areas. So I don't know which one I should start with. So first is, Indian startups trying to go outside and what brand should they use? I mean, do they want to go with a local brand or do they want to pitch themselves as an Indian company? And I think I'll just briefly touch upon this point because this is particularly important for Pune. Pune, as you know, leads more in enterprise software or B2B software. Pune has traditionally not been as strong as, say, Bangalore or Delhi in B2C software, like Flipkarts of the world, right? But in B2B software, we have quite a few companies in Pune that have created world-class products in enterprise infrastructure software, and they are selling it all over the world. Now, we have seen quite a few of these companies that start with strong domain knowledge, have good VC funding, and one of the first things they do is set up an entity in the Silicon Valley. And by the way, since you mentioned Israel, a lot of Israeli companies have also followed that approach because ultimately, if you're building infrastructure software, enterprise software, the best market and the early adopters are in Silicon Valley, which is the tech world. So you want to be there where your customer is, right? So as a result, these companies and the VCs also insist them that they should have their presence there. So Pune, you will see a lot of examples of companies having done that. And there they obviously portray themselves as US companies because they're funded by international VCs, they're registered there legally, they have their sales team there. And that is fine because, ultimately India is not exactly known for products. India, on the other hand, for the last 20, 25 years, has now built a great reputation as a services, IT services country. So it's interesting that today, if you go to US as a services company, then you'll definitely portray yourself as an Indian company. Because in fact, that's considered to be an advantage over an American services company. Maybe that same thing will happen with products in the next 10 years as our R&D capabilities go up and we come up with more and more world-class products. Today, it's not there. Since you mentioned Israel, I was fortunate to visit that country early this year as part of a startup delegation that their government had organized. And we got a chance to visit quite a few of their top universities, incubators, VCs. And you're absolutely right. I mean, for such a small country, they have been able to produce some real world-class R&D. And thus far, their primary market was US. But now they're increasingly looking at India as a good growth market as well. And there are a lot of areas where we can benefit from their IP development, whether it's whether it's agriculture, water management, core infrastructure software, security, whole bunch of different areas. And they also understand that it's difficult for them to enter Indian market directly. Say compared to US companies, they don't have that kind of reach. They're smaller companies. So they are looking to partner or collaborate with Indian startups so that there is some amount of joint work where some amount of development, some amount of R&D, and more importantly, the go-to-market can be handled by the Indian counterpart. So there is a lot of interest on their side to see if they can tie up, collaborate, do joint ventures, do joint startups, ventures with Indian counterparts. And one more thing I'll just add is, last year there was a good venture fund announced by the two governments when the two prime ministers visited each other's countries, which is a joint fund specifically created for that. So there again, going back to the earlier question, right? There's government funding available for such joint innovations, which is jointly funded by both countries. So there's a lot of opportunity specifically with respect to Israel in that area. So I hope I've addressed both the areas.
Yeah, I think there was something very interesting that happened in the recent past. The new president of America decided to cancel a particular visa category. I think everybody heard about it. What happened in the bargain is exactly what he was talking about. Our service-based industry, our famous technology giants, lost 4,000 crores in share value in one night. Imagine one visit visa cancellation in America, 4,000 crores get wiped out. How does that happen? That only happens when people don't plan for what they're doing. It's very good to have these contracts in America and in Germany and the rest of the world, but what happens when they restrict you? When the game starts becoming my own market first before your market? This whole business of winning contracts is very good for a shareholder, but very bad for future economy. I think one of the things that the Indian continent needs to work on is exactly what he said, R&D. There has to be more capability in design in this country. You have the skills for it. It's just that you're not able to turn that into something realistic that could end up in the market. So someone was recently asking me about, what do you think about the two companies who are competing with each other? I think he mentioned Snapdeal or Flipkart, I'm not sure. And he said Amazon. I said, no, they're not competing companies. He said, no, they're both e-commerce players. I said, Snapdeal is, Amazon is not. Amazon is a technology company. They make more than $20 billion in data services. So you need to understand that when you refer to some of these big companies, their concept of business is different. Now, having said that, that's another cue for the Indian startup industry. The Indian startup industry needs to give birth to the Googles and the Yahoos. The reason for that is all other lower tier entrepreneurs come on top of that layer. What's happening in India is everybody works isolated. So if a Snapdeal is launched, and I'm just using it as an example, I'm not saying anything of Snapdeal, I'm just using an example. If Snapdeal is launched, there is not enough industry that can grow on top of Snapdeal, startup industry that is, which is a problem. The other problem is Indian industry, as in customers, the ICICIs of the world, the SBIs of the world, the Air India and Jet Airways of the world, they need to adopt these startup technologies, at least for prototyping and piloting, which is what Germany does very well. Universities need to encourage industry to participate and work with young entrepreneurs for them to fail in a controlled environment rather than a marketplace. So these kind of changes will be very important for India to do. And that's an advantage, it's not a disadvantage. It's always good to know what to do rather than having done the wrong thing too long. So I think participation from people like us and others who are much more wiser than us should lead this country to a much different 2020 than what was planned. Now, all the economic numbers are talking about, you know, this GDP and that GDP. Doesn't really matter. What matters is what can you do to add to that number? You have to participate in the growth of the country. You have to think large. But for you to think large, you need to start using the toolkit. Yesterday when we were talking, and we were talking about, I don't know if you guys have seen this video of a Formula One car when it comes to the pit. There are like 6 guys on one side and 6 guys on the other side. They quickly, within 10 seconds, remove the tire, change the fuel engine, and the car goes off, right? You must have seen that. It happens in less than 10 seconds. That only happens because each one of those 12 guys has been trained for his job and his job only. Then he has been given the tools required to finish his job correctly. And then he has been given a deadline that he needs to do his job within that much time. So as far as the Indian startup industry is concerned, please do not follow the conventional industry standards. All right, so one of the questions that was asked to me on the side was, you know, what if somebody is dishonest or not ethical? Well, that should never even be a question. If you want to be a professional, you have to be honest. You have to be ethical. If somebody tells you that that guy is a big guy today because he cheated so many people, well, good for him. If you want to live a legacy, something that people will remember you by, then you need to first develop ethics of good practice. And honesty is not an option. It's just not an option. So I think these are the kind of things from a school, college, university level, incubator, accelerator level can be adopted. And that's why we believe that the opportunity here is very good.
Thank you, Abdullah. I could not agree more, but yes, you guys need to wake up and not be the service company here and providing services to foreign countries or companies. You have to create your own service and company to make things happen. And not just like a small part of the company, the builder and the architect. This is important. And what we also do with what we see in Phantonic, that's why we are here. And we're using also the system and the structure and network of Phantonic to make this happen. And that's why you're also here, guys. And we want to give our knowledge to you guys, because we did it in Europe and in Germany, and we will do it here also in India, but much more faster. So it takes not 15 years, it takes 5 years to make India yes again.
I just want to add one more thing. Even if you are proud to be an Indian company, you should see yourself as a global venture, because everything nowadays merges together. You have your customers outside of India. So maybe you're based in India, but the company structure should always be and always have a big vision and a global reach.
Abdullah, while you were speaking, you actually touched upon how you look at Amazon as a technology company, and this is quite interesting. I don't know if you've tracked the food tech industry in India, but around 6 to 7 years back, where there was this frenzy of food tech companies, so food tech was basically delivering food door to door, and investors were also very excited, delivering food door to door as food tech. And I actually failed to understand what is technology in delivering food to door to door. And the businesses started failing, significantly started failing. Because the technology was not about delivering food door to door. It was actually a logistics business. And believe you me, lots of funds, billions of dollars have actually gone into some of these ventures because the word technology was abused. You were not treating them as technology companies, logistics companies, which means the conversations with VCs were not happening with respect to improving the delivery costs and efficiencies by 10x, 20x that would make sustainable business models. And you had a lot of money being burnt in that direction. And now, after 5 to 6 years, the ones that are actually surviving and doing well have now started repositioning themselves from food tech companies to delivery companies and looking the matrix very differently. So sometimes it's not only the startup who's to be blamed for abusing the word technology or not being able to decode the value proposition effectively. We've also seen the immaturity of a lot of investors also that has actually made it happen. I was also in one of the conferences I had gone. I was speaking with the CEO of Dubai Bank, and he was talking about all the blockchain and all that they are implementing. And it was very interesting to hear from him that most of the solutions that are being implemented are actually from Indian startups and Indian ventures. Now, the reason I bring this point is if there are any startups over here and they want to launch their businesses in Europe, Middle East, what kind of infrastructure access is available to them and how you can play that role for them? Please, Abdullah.
Well, I think the biggest infrastructure available to you is environment. So what will happen is if you begin to collaborate, let's say with a startup in Germany, or a college in Germany, a university in Germany, you will begin to live their environment. You will begin to understand their best practice methods, something that you may not necessarily have here. So what will happen is you will learn. You have to realize that as we are growing forward, and I was just saying it in another event, maybe by 2030 or 2040, there will be no need for colleges and universities. You just need to teach people the language and how to code. That's it. Everything else will become pointless. Why? Because if you look at where the industry is going, change is happening very fast. Nobody has time to waste. So the dropouts in America and even in Europe have increased. They don't really see the reason of going through university. I can't say something like that in this country. I might be stoned to death. Because people believe that higher education is a prerequisite for everything in this world. So when you begin to interact with other cultures, I mean cultures of work, okay? When the Germans have decided now that they will work only 4 days a week, that's not because they are lazy. It's because they have set up systems, processes, workflows. You can't see a German guy looking at his phone when he's working. Okay, you won't see them joking around and having a ball on the side. They have their day to party, they have their time to party. So, you know, you need to understand certain cultures. Okay, and I was watching him party yesterday. You need to get those cultures and take the best what you can. So when you work with other cultures, that collaboration makes you a better professional. You know, when you hire a consultant, you know, the PricewaterhouseCoopers and the E&Ys of the world, why are you doing that? You're doing that to improve process. So one of the things that is missing in this country, as far as startups is concerned, is marketing and branding. And I'm not referring to marketing that people use for customer acquisition, which is dumping millions of dollars in amazing campaigns just to capture your market share over his market share and then his over hers, and in the bargain, everybody dies because it's just a price war. You have to be a business that has business fundamentals. The misconception among the startup entrepreneurs about, I'm an entrepreneur, hence I am holier than thou. No, you're not. You still have to deliver salaries, sales, net margins, and keep your investors happy, and guess what? They're customers as well. You have to realize you may be an entrepreneur, but if your father owned a shop for 50 years, you're actually going to do exactly what he's doing. Just the difference is the jeans and the t-shirt. The business fundamentals in entrepreneurship do not change. You have to end up delivering on P&Ls. So while we have the big names that do big front page news of acquisitions and mergers and the rest, don't get carried away. Focus on what you really need to deliver. And that begins from right at the start. Why did you start your startup? Are you copying someone? Like Akshit said earlier, so many people in the food delivery business, all of a sudden. Just because someone succeeded, there'll be 50 coming after him. Because there's no brain in it, right? How difficult is it to copy? In fact, they even call the developers and say, can you do the app just like this guy? In fact, do you know that some of the Indian developers, when we call them from overseas, he goes like, do you want it like Groupon? Do you want it like Facebook? Do you want it like LinkedIn? And this is the problem. You need to get out of this. You can't be copycatting so long. It's been a long time. It really is a long time. If this country has to change, turn a leaf like they say, you need to start developing original ideas. I'm not talking about everybody needs to create a new Uber and a new Airbnb. I'm just saying be original. And to be original, you need to start having certain skills which, if you collaborate with international communities, you may develop much faster than if you tried yourself.
So how can you help startups expand into Europe? Yeah. How can you help Indian startups to expand into Europe?
Depends what the vision is of the startup. I mean, if you guys are willing to move on in Europe, and are you big enough, and depends on the market. If you want to go to Europe, I mean, are you willing to do the step, and do you need more money? Do you need other customers? Or, I mean, the Indian market is big enough. So we had this discussion before a few times, and if you are in the agriculture business, take a look to you. Yes. I mean, just move on here in India, start your business here, and then if it attracts other companies or business partners in Europe, move on to Europe. But the question is, how do you move on your business in Europe, or how do you attract investors or partners in Europe? Business. I mean, that's why we're here. I mean, what we're doing a collaboration, and the Indian market is huge enough to create businesses here. And also, as Abdullah said before, you guys need to develop and to execute, not just talking. I mean, to find the idea, the good idea, and the good idea. Maybe the good idea is a good idea. The innovative idea, and you have to move on and adjust your idea or the business model as much as you can. This is the most important. And you guys were asking also what we are interested in here, in what we are doing here, and what companies we are looking for, or what technology, and we are mostly looking at the people. You guys making the business happen, and I mean, again, if you're not the right guys, you can't change your business. Yeah? You can't change your business model, and we looking at the guys who can change your business model, and who are willing to run the marathon, much more than this. So, and of course, if we come back to your question, if you're willing to come to Europe, we are happy to help you with, from our side or from our perspective, to open our network in Europe. And again, it depends on the business model.
I mean, we're also saying that you have to believe in the Indian economy, because a lot of things are saturated in the Western world. So most likely, a lot of Western companies will come to India. So you should set up something here in India and be very believe in your country, and then European and US companies will follow and come to India. So, and then I mean, in 5 to 10, 15 years, India will be the biggest economy in the world. So why should you focus or copy other things from around the world? You should innovate, as Abdullah mentioned, and think a little bit and not just copy. So, and the market is big enough, so you should definitely believe in the potential of this market. So, and we are all here to support and to bring this message also to around the world, to bring other people, great people here.
Basically what I hear is it's actually, sorry.
Yeah, I think for a number of years in India, there's a slogan about being local and operating global. So they use the term called glocal. I think everybody heard of it, right? I think it's time to take out the GL out of it and just go local. You need to be a local company. You need to be a local operation for multinationals to actually engage with you. I just attended a pitch session inside, we all did. And they were raising money, and I wish them well. But what they were doing is already something that we have invested in. So we can definitely help them for collaboration. Okay, so there may be many instances where we may not necessarily invest in you, but we will definitely collaborate with you and let you be accessible to better technologies, larger products that you can take into this market and make a big place for yourself. So you need to be very, very local these days. That should really work for you.
I'll come to you, Amit, but a very interesting perspective that I heard from all three of you was you need not really look at going global at this point in time. Everybody is coming to India, and India is a large enough market, so it makes sense to deepen your product or a service to service India much more effectively, and that could actually make you a unicorn in itself. That's a very interesting perspective. But Amit, you've also been working on a lot of international collaborations. Have you worked, or do you have certain case studies to share where either any international startup could venture into India or Indian startup could establish a base outside?
So I think there are a few companies in Pune. One of them is also setting an incubator here, which is doing good collaboration, startup collaboration work with Israel, and they have invested back in Israel as well. So that anyone interested in that should visit the Bhau Institute of Incubation in College of Engineering, Pune, because that's where they are going to be physically located. I think that's a good case study. I think with respect to US, there are always plenty of examples because there are enough Indian companies, as I mentioned earlier on, that we're going to they are basically setting up entities in the US initially for marketing, and later on as they become big enough, they're also setting it for R&D purposes, where they're actually hiring developers as well, right? Just one quick point on your earlier question, right? I think there's a lot of opportunities for Indian startups across the border, but I think more than collaboration, more than market, I think there's something even more fundamental, and which is where Indian startups and India in general needs to do a lot more, and that is some basic learning, right? I think we need to learn a lot more in all areas, right? And startups are no exception. In fact, they need to learn more. So there's a lot of best practices to study, whether it's academia, startup interaction, whether it's learning marketing at an early age in school itself, right? Whether it is, expanding your horizon, working closely with the customer. There are plenty of opportunities to do that if you work with good startup communities and universities and incubators in, say, Germany, in, say, England, US, obviously, Singapore, maybe, China. So, that's something that I see that Indian entrepreneurs don't do it enough. Again, this is a Pune-specific comment. It's a slight negative. I'm a hardcore Punekar, so I myself may hate that, but that's the reality. In general, Pune startups don't go out as much as even other city startups do within India itself. So let's start first with India. I mean, you should be all over India in terms of attending various events and all, and then next logical step for that is go outside India, attend events, talk to other startups, start collaborating with them. But it has to start. You have to have, I agree with you that we need to have a local view. India is going to be one of the biggest markets in the next 5-10 years. But there's a lot of learning that has to happen from stepping outside of your comfort zone and then bringing that learning back.
A couple of things I can definitely share, especially that you're giving a Pune perspective. So we started understanding the Pune market last year, exactly 1 year from now. And I told that last time also when we inaugurated Funtonic with a similar conference, that a lot of cities in India, especially like Pune, have amazing entrepreneurial talent, with some excellent ideas, but they underestimate themselves a lot. They actually do not understand the real value of themselves. We don't have the time, but I can actually get into case studies of some high-tech stuff and what can actually be sold at a valuation of at least 2 to 3 million at an early stage. These guys are ready to offer themselves at $500,000 valuation. And I had to actually educate them, don't offer yourself at a $500,000 valuation. Also because as an investor, I understand over dilution wouldn't be good for me over a period of time. But yes, I agree with you. And markets like Pune, where the entrepreneur pool is excellent, expectations are more reasonable as compared to startups from Mumbai, Bangalore, Delhi, are an attractive destination for us. We've already invested in 2 Pune startups and we are actively looking at few more. Before we move to Q&A, I think we are running out of time. I have one last question before we share the overall view after the Q&A. There's been a time where investing in India always had question marks around governance, corporate governance, ethics from international investors. And it's glad to see investors like you now putting in much more confidence and are ready to take risk at early stage companies. But when you're actually investing in startups in India or any other geography, how do you ensure that ethics, governance, reporting, integrity, everything is taken care of?
I mean, basically, it is still a lot of risk. So it's getting better, but we always hope that it keeps stable. So the political landscape for a lot of people, also in our network, they always think it's still too much risk to invest. So we're actually only a few, and actually one of the first movers with some other people to do some work here in India.
The dirty work, actually. It's a dirty work. I mean, it's I mean, it's.
I mean, it's educational work. So what we experience here, we of course bring back to Germany, we bring back to the Middle East, we bring it to the US, and have great discussions with other people and investors to convince them to go to India. So of course they are very smart and they know the statistics, but to convince them to do actions and to execute is the same as an entrepreneur. To execute, it takes a lot of work. And it's the same with the government. If the government thinks long term, they will establish a surrounding where foreign investors would love to invest and make it very simple and very easy and support entrepreneurship. So what we're missing, not only here in India, also back in Germany, also in other countries, the government support, it's still very low, and they put not too much money into innovations and in the right spaces. So what we love to do is to talk to a lot of people and bring this message to the right people. And it's a lot of work, dirty work, but we actually love it. So, and when you start a company, you should also love this process. So, in the end, to sum it up, if you love what you do, then we all together can make the difference. And we're all here to make the difference in India.
And we can talk the whole day today, but you have to collaborate with your competitors or whatever you call it, or your friends and neighbors, if they're doing the same business, if they are also in the startup business, don't hide yourself. This is a way Germany did it before, and they're still doing it. They hide themselves in the cellar, and they don't exchange their ideas and the vision. So they come out and then, oh my God, I'm here, and but no one knows you. But collaborate, and you will get bigger. Yeah. There's no competitor for you. You are the best. And you have to believe you are the best, and you are the best. Yes?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the UK is a very good example. When the UK government decided to give tax benefits for people who invest in startups, the funding became massive. It jumped from a few million to hundreds of millions. So I think the Indian government needs to take a learning curve from this and actually offer these benefits to foreign investors investing in Indian startups, to give them some bait, some brownies for them to actually come in big numbers. They're coming now. Not that they're not. 13 billion was a big number last year. But if there were more benefits for them, I think that number would have doubled, if not tripled. So there is a role for government to play in this. There's a very big role, of course, for a regulator to be established sooner rather than later, because the sooner you regulate this industry, the better it is for the industry to have certain policies that allow for people to work within parameters, within rules and regulations. The entire industry is currently working the startup entrepreneurship world as if it's a private equity environment, and it's not. Private equity works differently. So when we come in from the outside in, we are told about SEBI rules. So SEBI has this rule and SEBI has that rule. And when we start looking at the rules, they are for conventional funds. They are not for startup funds. And it becomes challenging for us to look at that. So what happens in the bargain is that we use SPVs outside to come in and invest. And we are taking a careful approach on that. So to kind of address what you were saying in terms of ethics, I think the money coming in is already following a regulated, compliant environment. It is when it comes to India that India and Indian authorities need to worry about how that money is being used and what is being developed with it. Because I was reading a report that said that from the start of the whole startup industry in the world, more than $400 billion have been invested in startups. So if I was to judge that as a good case scenario, then I would have expected so many new jobs being created. They weren't, because with all numbers that are around, at least 80–85% of those startups failed. So there has to be some regulation around this whole scenario, because if there is none, then investors are a bit more cautious. So if the local authorities take initiative and take a drive from this, then it should be very interesting for foreign investors like us to come in and consider more investment.
I think we are running out of time. Any questions? Oh, a lot of them. Okay. Can somebody please volunteer there? Please shoot.
Easy to copy any product. Product in the sense it can be a service or whatever the startup is dealing with. One startup is, there are two startups. One is, both are dealing in the same sector, but one has other product, the other startup has other product. What should be our point of view looking at that scenario wherein we have a product, we can launch it into the market, but it may happen that the startup which is dealing in the same sector may follow the suit after some time. So what's the scope for the new startup to develop?
I guess I can take it since I have the mic. I think that's, if you have more than one company doing the same product, I think it's a good problem to have. I think that's validation. There is never going to be a space where you're not going to have a competitor. So I think it boils down to execution, right? I mean, too many startups we meet at an early stage think that they have the best idea in the world, right? And first of all, it's not necessarily the best idea. Secondly, even if you have a good idea, it really doesn't matter. It matters how well you execute. So, don't worry about, and if there are a few other players doing that, that's actually good. That means the market is validated, right? I mean, the standard example that's quoted all the time is Google was not the first search engine, right? And you know what happened. So that's a good problem to have. Most product guys who become entrepreneurs, and we meet a lot of them, right? They are too fascinated and too fixated with the product IP. I'm talking about software startups here, because that's what they know and they think that's the most important thing. Well, the reality is 80–90% of your effort in the early stage and even later needs to be on the sales and marketing side. And most techies don't realize that. Like, invest your efforts in sales and marketing, not on writing more code.
Just to add to that, sorry. So if you are solving the same problem, both the starts, and the customer segment is the same, but the product is different, or the service is different, which means the approach to solving the problem is different. If I'm an investor, as Amit rightly mentioned, one is I'll look at the entrepreneur, his execution capability. Second, I understand you have to constantly innovate. Innovate doesn't mean you have to come up with one satellite every second day, which is innovate, which means you have to innovate on your business models. And that is something that will help you keep ahead of the curve as compared to other entrepreneurs. And that's where I'll take a bet.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Satish Batsure. I wanted to ask at what stage a startup should look at some international investment like whatever panel we are having here?
Three of you. At what stage should a startup look at international investments?
Immediately. If you are ready for investment, I guess you are ready for investment. It depends on where you are on the frying stage. You know, are you ready to serve? Are you still not cooked? Are you still in the prep area? So which part of the kitchen are you in? So based on that, I will take a decision. So if you are ready to serve, then I know that I'll need to enter at a high value ticket. If you're right at the kitchen and I like the idea of what you're going to serve, then I'll say, fine, let me invest in you at this stage. So it all begins with what is your idea of investment? At what stage? We come at seed, we come at A, we come at B. I don't prefer B's and C's, but yeah, there are people who do.
I mean, the question is, do you need only money, or do you also need partnerships with strategic investment, or just dumb money? Who I'm talking to, I don't know who was asking. Ah.
And I mean, of course, it always depends on the business model. Some business model needs more money than other business models, and it would be very dumb to give away a lot of shares in the beginning if you can do it by yourself with less money. So it all depends on the case.
So it means eating more shit before, or more shit, and then moving on, be consistent or like persistent, and then if you're ready, you're ready. You feel it in your gut, right?
Just one person. If I was to invest in a startup which is outside India,